have a very full agenda today, and with anyone who's here, we've got plenty of handouts.
Yes.
So I'm just going to turn it right over to Ms. Manuel. What I am just going to remind is that all the handouts that are here, that the audience here today is seeing, if we could please make sure that we upload them to our agenda for today so that anyone who's missed the meeting can go back and look at them, okay?
Yeah, and those are
Okay.
already up.
They're already there, perfect, we are on fire.
Ruth, okay.
Thank you very much,
Yes,
Ruth,
it's very
thank
good.
you, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So at the request of this committee, they wanted to take a look at our debt service schedules. So, and I think that came from just understanding what debt we're facing and also the length of the debt. Because typically, if you did want to do any type of a bond, you want to make sure it coincides with when some debt is
It's
falling
coming off.
right? So we do have some long-term debt and we have some shorter-term debt. And just this offers kind of a basic look at the different types of debts that schools are able to have. So the first one is a serial bond. This is with voter approval, and it's usually for big capital expenditures, and they last about 25 years or 30 years.
Of which we had in 2015, right?
Yes,
So the
correct.
bond that we've had in 2015 would be considered a serial bond.
Yes, that's correct. And you also had another serial bond for a roof project. That was, I think in 2012. It was. So this gives you, the chart actually gives you the amount of the debt. So you'll see the 2015 is 59.5 million. And then you have the roof project is 6.79%. Now you see other things. You see Johnson Control, that's an energy performance payable, contract payable. And these are used, it's through some state aid and also the savings due to the upgrades. So that's how we're paying for this. This didn't require voter approval because it's paid for through that. The other two at the end are shorter term debt, and that's really for installment debt payable. So when we purchased some devices a couple of years ago in 2024, you'll see that's the smaller debt in the second column from the right. And then you'll see network installment. We had to do a refresh to all of our network and our Wi-Fi capability. So you'll see the device installment debt is falling off in 2027. So what most districts do is we try to do another refresh where we'll look at all our devices, see which one we can still sell off and actually generate revenue from.
Falling off in 2027 or 2029?
2027.
Okay, sorry,
Right.
yes, thanks.
So you might want to refresh the laptops or the Chromebooks and stuff.
So what is the benefit of refreshing? Why refresh?
Right, so it's to have the current technology so that our students are always using the current technology.
Right, other than that, I meant, I'm sorry, the economic benefit, so
Sure.
what is,
So when you lease to purchase, it's actually a better way of financing because you can spread it out over 3 years instead of having a $6 million spike in your technology budget. It's a way to be proactive, and it helps to smooth out your budget so that you have a constant, you'll have the 1.3 in debt. You won't have to jump up to like 6 million one year and have lows. So that's really the benefit to it. Does that answer your question?
that does answer my question, I'm just putting it out there.
Okay, sure. And then we have installment debt payable, and that's really these purchase lease agreements.
There's a lot of handouts.
So is there any questions about? Oh, one thing I should mention too is your big bond, the 59.52, you'll see it goes until 2038. And you'll see the roof project goes until 2032. So you'll notice the first like 5 years, we show the actual payments, but then we kind of lump it all together just so we don't have to make a big long sheet.
Of course.
So typically schools, well, not typically, but schools are not permitted to enter into debt that's over 10% of their assessed valuation. So you have to be careful when issuing debt that you don't overextend the district. So our district is not overextended at all. This affects your Moody's rating. So when we go out to get TANs each year or to do any kind of borrowing, even these small leases, it helps us because we do have such a good rating. We're competitive, so other investment bankers, they will actually bid on our TANs. We receive like about 7 bids, which is really impressive for schools because they see us as a secure financial investment.
Just in layman terms, the 2024, 2025, all these numbers, that's the payout?
This is the debt and this is the principal and the
Interest payments,
Yeah.
yes, what we
Payments.
pay,
The
yes.
total.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So what was the original amount for the 2015 bond?
59.
69
Yeah, on
million.
the top in that box, it's
That's
59.52.
As of right now,
Yeah.
those are all the payouts. So that, I just on a quick math, that equals 59. So what was the debt?
We've had other we had bands.
So are you
So
asking
each-
what the original bond was
Yeah.
for? I
The
think it
amount.
was
Yes.
It's like 60.
69.79, just under 70 million.
So we've only paid out about 10 million.
Yeah.
Right, so what happened with this, because now it's 2025, right, so it's 10 years later. We didn't actually bond this until 2 years ago.
Recently, like maybe 2
Yeah.
years, yeah.
So for probably 8 or 9 years, the district carried what's called a BAN, which is a bond anticipation note. Because you can't borrow all of the money if you're not going to spend it right away. You have arbitrage issues where we could be making money off of investing those funds.
Okay.
So what the district does is based on what they think they're gonna spend each year, we go out for a ban to cover that short-term debt. So then when you've spent, I believe it's 90% of what your total project was gonna be, then the district can actually go out and bond it. So that's what happened.
It's actually a very important question that you asked and for clarification, because I think when we hear sometimes people saying, why is the bond still there? And, you know, it was back then, why are we still paying and what is our debt? I think people don't realize that you have to do this whole band process. So it's good to have that clarification.
Why did the band take so long? That's not a cynical question, that's
Yeah.
a real,
Sure.
7 years until the actual first,
Sure.
yeah.
Because that's how long the construction
Yeah.
took.
for the construction.
Yeah,
Okay.
so each year, it wasn't just one ban,
Yeah.
it was several bans, because
Yeah.
each year, just kind of like we do a TAN, which is a tax anticipation note, a ban, the bond is secure, so you're able to borrow a portion of that bond, so that's why it's a ban, a bond anticipation note. So each year, based on what the construction is proposed, you can borrow another amount. So you pay off the other ban
Yeah.
that you just issued, and now you issue new debt, so it's a
The
little
roof,
confusing.
the roof bond, what was the original?
I believe it was the 6.79,
Okay,
and that was
so that's something.
refinanced, was it back in 20? I'm not sure when it was refinanced, but
I don't remember.
we actually,
know we have.
I
the
don't-
district went back and
It's a long
refinanced
time
it to
ago.
have better interest rates.
You good? Thanks. Julie, you have questions?
So now that we're going to be entering into the EPC, we will see that now as new debt in the same format as our Don Johnson's controls, paid
Yes.
out by state aid, other funding, and also the savings from all
yes.
of it. So
Yeah, so it's really funded from the savings and
Correct.
state aid, there's no other way that it's paid for. And that is guaranteed, so they'll do measurements and verification each year. We have an independent entity that actually verifies that that's actually taking place.
sounds good.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Right.
Next.
Next, we're gonna go a little bit out of order than what's on the agenda. But the next thing we would like to talk about is the state aid picture. So there's a colorful document that looks like this. And the reason it's so colorful is because I like to
Because it's
use-
colorful.
No, because I like to use highlighters. So when I go through the state aid runs, I highlight different categories because as you can imagine, this is what a state aid run looks like. So it's kind of, it's a little complicated if you're not sure what you're looking at. So each year, I go and I compare things. So if you look at the first column, it says voter-approved budget. So this is the revenue last year that we went with, and we said we believe we're gonna get this much aid. Then I have next to it the state aid run. This is what the executive proposal is. I'm sorry, the state aid run is not the executive.
No, it's from the January from last year,
Right,
yeah.
they run each month, they update their runs. This is what they're saying that we're receiving.
For
So-
2025.
Right, so you can see there's variance between what we budgeted and what they're saying we're going to receive. Then you see the executive proposal. This is the proposal that the mayor put out. And
Mayor?
that's
The governor,
Governor.
that's okay.
Too many people.
too much
Yes.
NyQuil list. So what I've done is I've showed you the difference between the voter approved and the actual state aid runs as of January 25. So
So
you'll
what
see
happens in
the-
that case, yes?
Right, so you'll see in the first column where it says executive proposal variance from. So we're showing that we're gonna be $1 million below last year's budget. And for the current year, we're gonna be about 400,000 below.
$1 million from last year's approved voter
Right.
budget, right? Voted
Yes.
upon budget.
Right.
Okay. Based on the state runs that were run in January
Of this year.
of this year.
So of this year, we're gonna be about 400,000. But if you look at, because it's a little confusing, when you look at her run, it looks like we're only getting 600,000 because they're using a different run.
600,000, which,
Less.
where are you coming up with that 600,000?
From her state run.
Oh,
Yeah,
from
so
her
if you
state
look-
run.
Yeah,
Right.
and if you look at this, it'll show you the negative 600. But this number up here that she's comparing it to is not our budget.
She's comparing it to 1353, right? The top number,
Yeah,
the 20 million, and we're not using 20 million.
no, she's comparing it to the 19 million.
Middle column.
19.8.
Yeah, but
correct.
under her runs, I see 20,942. So what did you take out?
So you have to back out the UPK, because that's actually federal funds, not state funds.
Correct.
So
So they
minus
like
the
to put-
UPK.
Right, so,
Okay, got it.
But-
I just want to, for anybody who's looked at the runs, to understand the
But
difference in
wait
the
a minute,
numbers.
it sounded like from the beginning what you were saying, and I followed it until we started doing something different. Our voter-approved budget was at 20 million, and the executive proposal right now is at 19 million. And you were saying we're at $1 million difference between
Correct.
that and this at this point, right? That's, so I understood that correctly. Okay, great, sorry, keep going.
okay.
Correct, but
Just
what
a
I think what Kathy is pointing out is that we're saying we're at $1 million less. The executive budget shows that we're $400,000.
600.
600,000,
Right,
right.
600,000 less.
Correct.
So in our conversations that, I'm sorry that I forgot to even add this to our agenda, but just kind of like a lead-in. When we, so as everybody remembers, we got approval from the Board of Education to meet with our, as a budget committee, to meet with our legislators. And we've already set up a meeting on January 31st, this coming Friday at 3:30 PM with Assemblyman Norber. So it's important to remember these kind of things, because when they look at it, and, especially, they'll say, but no, we're disagreeing, you're not that off, so we just have to keep that in mind. Okay, let me ask another question before you do, Sandra. Sorry.
Let me ask a question before I ask my question. Sure.
Isn't it typical that the January 25 state runs may not be in accord aligned with our voter-approved budget? And could you explain why that's typical?
Sure, because
Was that your
there,
question?
It was my question, and it's exactly 2%, so I was just wondering, is it a typical percentage difference?
okay,
I
so,
beat you.
so the reason why it's different are there are different data sets, and we put information in, so that's where the numbers are based off of. Also, if you look at foundation aid for the budget approved by the voters, We assumed that the formula was going to run according to the way it should have run with the CPI correct amount.
Last year.
Right, Governor
Correct.
Hochul went in and put a different amount. I think she put like 2.8 instead of 3.1. So that number right there is what we should have gotten, the 13,639,000. Because the actual legislative runs didn't come out until we had already
Correct,
put this in.
correct.
So here's my thing for the assembly person too. If you look at what they're proposing we get under her executive proposal,
13,620.
that's still lower than what we should have gotten last year
Yes.
if it had run according to. Where if you look at her runs, it says we got a 2% increase in foundation aid. That's 2% off of the wrong amount.
Right.
Because they never corrected last year's budget run.
Because that's what they kept it at last year.
Exactly.
Okay.
So
is this
she's,
typical?
Oh,
No,
it's
last
not
year was not
typical.
typical,
It
last
should
year.
have
yeah.
run
So
the way the
just to
law says.
remind me and ourselves,
I'm-
right? Last year, we had done these proposals, and then by the time they adopted the budget, it was past the time that we had to adopt our number, correct? I'm asking you and saying it at the same time.
Correct.
So it was too late for us to make adjustments on our number, and what we said last year is, it doesn't really matter, we're approving an overall budget number, and so we kind of just left it at that. But when you start to break it down, it's, the numbers were off from the beginning.
Right,
Okay.
and so,
That was for me, by the way, for my own purpose, for my
well, it's good to
memory.
refresh everybody's memory. So also, if you look lower, you see excess cost aid, BOCES aid, you have the textbook software aid, transportation and building aid. So these are what are known as expense-driven aids. So whatever our expenditures are, there's a certain percentage that you'll receive. So all of ours decreased, pretty much, except for the one of the textbook aids. If you look at
And
And
transportation.
the private excess
Oh, we were talking
costs,
about
that
that.
also
Right, so-
increased, yes.
So I spoke with Brian Tisnicki, he's
Yeah.
the director of ASBO New
ASBO.
York.
Right.
And I said, you know, it's nice that the governor says we're getting a 2% increase in foundation aid, but it's still not where we were last year. I said, and all of our expense aids have gone down. And he said, well, they didn't change the formulas, it must be the data changed. And I said, no, our data has actually increased. So they said that overall the state increased maybe 11 million, but for the downstate areas, our actual wealth ratios have changed. Because everyone in our quadrant, like Syosset, North Shore, Great Neck, Jericho, all their expense aids have also decreased. So Brian Tisnicki is looking into why we were affected so much. He believes that you had 2020 when a lot of people left the city and came to the island schools or Westchester. Now those people are going back to the city, so their enrollment in New York City is actually increasing, which shifts more of the state aid to the city, and it changes
Oh, that
our
sounds like a
population.
Are we
serious
really seeing that? I mean, we're not
non-issue.
seeing that, but that's what he's saying.
that he
is-
believes the cause is, so he's gonna look
Yeah,
more
he needs
into
to
it,
look real deep, because that's wrong.
because the wealth ratio is changing for our district, so they're looking at like another year.
But ours is not. Washington has not changed.
Our
Well,
wealth
our
ratio,
demographics has not, but according to the wealth of our land, it may seem like everyone's income is not increasing, but it's the formulas that they have in place have changed.
do you know what our wealth ratio changed to, from
I
what
don't
to
have all
what?
those
So you don't have
statistics,
that,
'cause
so
they're
he's,
just getting the runs because these just came out.
of course, okay.
So there's files that back up this data. and
So
the
can I just ask, is our data correct? I just wanna make sure
The
that
data
our
is correct.
information, because,
Yes.
and we have a certain amount of time, right? There are dates that have to be submitted that sometimes are not in line with when the runs are done, cause I remember that was sometime, we saw a little bit of that, we've seen it in the past. So the runs that they're using, the actual data that they have all of ours back,
Yes,
it's
ours
correct.
is all correct,
Okay,
yes.
I just
because-
wanna make sure that that's in line.
Yes.
So what you're
So when
saying,
I saw these runs, the first thing I did is I went to Jessica and I went to our treasurer, Donna.
to make sure we had
Because
sent them.
Donna's the person who
Right.
puts the information to the ST3s. Jessica looked at the building aid because you see we have a drop in it.
Mhm.
And she did see that there are a few there was a big project
me to-
that was, sure.
So, this year in 24-25, as compared to last year, we had over $300,000 worth of aid drop-off. We had two big projects from a long time ago, one Weber, one Schreiber that dropped off. But I added a lot of projects from the recent construction, so, even though it says the building aid is 1.3 million for this year, I had, estimated when I did the projections last year, there'd be 1.25, and we got 65,000 more because of things dropping off and other things coming up. And then that 921,000, when I apply the same methodology and formula, I'm getting 1.26. So I think that 900,000 is
Wrong.
inaccurate, you know?
So based on.
So, because look how close I was last year for
Right,
this
so-
year,
but
so.
what- So you think, how will that change though? You're saying that they haven't calculated it correctly?
No,
I'm
for the data that they have, they've accounted for it correctly. Jessica's saying once they get these other.
The new data,
projects.
The new
it'll
data, then it
change.
will
Well,
change.
so for next year, we could probably increase this, like 1.1 or so, just to be
Right, so
conservative.
900,000.
So for this year, well, for the 25-26, it will, you're saying it potentially will increase still?
Correct.
Okay.
In
Once they
actual
get the-
received,
Once they receive the new data,
right,
okay.
I know, I'm good, as confused as you.
No, I'm not, no, I have several questions just to clarify a lot that was said. I was trying to be patient.
Thank you.
Okay, so just to backtrack back to my original question of the 2% difference with the state-run numbers as of today, I asked if that was typical. Everyone said that's not typical, so it's never been off by 2%?
Wait.
I wasn't sure that was the question.
I didn't
Okay,
hear
so
that as
my
your question
question is,
either, yes.
so my question was,
I don't either.
the voter-approved budget of the 13, let's just say overall, 20,268,000, your first column versus the second column of the state runs, that's a 2% difference of being off. Is that typical that it's off by 2% in prior years?
I've never actually looked at the percent that it was off, but it
Is
is typical
To be off?
It is typical that it's off.
But in the same regard, what was atypical about last year was that the number used in the formula for the state runs in that second column was not an accurate inflation number, CPI number, right? And so by statute, the governor is supposed to use a certain set CPI number. She decided to decrease that number by almost, it was close to 2%. This is where you're seeing that come into play, right? And instead, and that's why our numbers are off. So I don't get hung up on the 2% because typically, and what you're reading in the news is that the governor is saying she's increasing foundation aid by 2%. So the number 2% gets thrown around a lot, tax levies, all
Give me
these different
1.9, I
things.
did a rough 2%.
No, but I'm just saying it's not necessarily the percentage. What is happening is that the formula from last year was not followed from a regulatory standpoint with the correct inputs.
I'm just talking about margin of error, right? Like just in general margin of error in all of these runs, in all prior years, regardless of like where the error was of
That's hard to say.
on her end, right? Of just, is there a typical 1%, 2% like difference, plus or negative, right? Like in
I've
prior years.
never analyzed.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
I
also,
don't think
it-
it's ever looked
It
at.
might be hard also, sorry, because remember historically,
It hasn't been fully
we haven't been
funded, yes.
fully
So then
funded,
there's the
and
other
then
part,
she
yes.
finally fully funded it,
Yep.
and then that threw off all of the historical changes
What I
in
can
data.
say though is that historically, the numbers, there's been a discrepancy.
Issues.
Yes.
So it's not necessarily by percentage points at anybody, but there's always been things back and forth from the original runs, right? The initial runs. By the time it gets approved, typically things have changed.
And usually the executive budget is the least you would get.
Yes,
When the
yes.
legislatures go and do their budget, you would typically get more. But what I'm hearing from my association is everyone thinks what the governor proposed is wonderful and it's terrific.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they're probably just gonna rubber stamp it and that's what we're gonna get, which concerns me.
Yeah.
Because of
So
all
if I
the
could have something to do with
expense-based aid
Well,
that's
they're happy
So
because she
data-
gave a safe harbor list.
Sorry. So the data was one of my original questions and the formula was one of my original questions. And then Emily, I think you both kind of talked about it, but for me, I saw all these reports because you posted it already online. The one thing that would help me just understand more moving forward is, can we be presented with the exact numbers that go into the formula as of this? Yes, I'm asking it, because the data, the reason is because you guys just had to ask a bunch of the questions about, well, what exactly, what data was incorrect, right? Like, so for me, there's nothing for me to review and look at because I don't know what data went into the formula.
It's
Like,
like a 100-page formula.
that's fine, I'm happy to see it myself and don't share it with the whole committee, but I wasn't able.
And if you can understand it, you could give like a seminar.
You can, that's what they're
I'm
looking
not-
for. There's
I'm-
3 people in
So
the
here's the
state
data
that
that I
do
would like to, here's the data that I'd like to look at, because I brought this up at one meeting, and I know there was like a comment of like, why would Syosset know our enrollment numbers, but like, I would like to just see, cause I went and I said, there's no way that our census information did not increase from the 2000 numbers to the 2020 numbers. And I looked up our census numbers
Yeah.
from 2000 to 2020, and it did increase. So for me, just as a trustee for this position, it's hard where I understand, like, I'm seeing this, but I'm just trying to understand the trend of where is it that Port Washington is going with this formula, not just for this year, right? For me, like, one of my notes is that we have to face reality also of where these numbers are with, and if it's the wealth ratio, right? This is the reality. This is, granted, there's gonna be advocacy efforts and we can, shout as much as you want, but you said it. Everyone seemed ecstatic about this, minus people that realize what 2% look
Whereas
like.
people downstate.
Correct.
Yes.
Right? So for me, I just thought it would help if we just saw the biggest ones that were argued with the change in the formula was that the census numbers changed.
Correct.
So I just wanted to
But
see
that's the
what
foundation
is,
aid formula.
Correct.
So the data that you were talking about was the expense aid formula,
there's two
which is
different
different.
formulas we're talking
Where
about.
those numbers went down, where our wealth ratios are changing.
Can
So
I
I'm
see
gonna make
that
sure-
also?
Yes, so that's
And
what.
then-
See as
Okay.
many reports as you want.
Yes.
So can I
it just helps me understand
No, I'm
it.
not, and I just wanna make sure we're clear, cause there's all these different formulas
You
and
want
data
the
going in different places.
expense-based aids.
Yeah, but I also, for foundation aid, for the we exactly hit a 2% for the foundation, just for the foundation aid run, state runs, like.
Right.
Because
That's
the
kind of the whole
guaranteed.
term.
Right, but
That's the
Yes,
whole,
that's it. So I wanted to see if that 2% wasn't there, right? Cause that was this, correct. Cause this year, she guaranteed the 2%, right?
Correct.
As of right now, she's stating a guaranteed 2%. I'd like to see if that 2% guarantee wasn't there, what would it have been? Are we talking about -5%, -4%? What is the dreariness of next year's? And I know that some of us are like, why don't we just wait to see it next year? But I just think it's better understanding to know where we landed on this beautiful new formula that they
The ol-
spent a lot of money.
only one thing changed on the formula, really.
Two things changed, census and poverty.
Barely, we're still arguing the poverty thing, remember? We just went to the NISBA thing, they're not happy with the poverty. numbers as
Nobody's
well.
happy with the guaranteed only 2%, I'm just so, but this is what happened for
Right,
this
right,
one,
right.
so.
I just want us to bring us back for a second, okay? So you're asking for the data that goes into the formula and,
For the foundation aid formula and for the expense
expense-based.
aid formula.
which,
Could just be shared.
Yeah, I think
to
it's
the
great,
line.
yeah.
They
just,
look like computer generated reports, so I'm just gonna upload like 4 years worth of stuff.
you could do it, yes, just send them to Sandra only.
No, we all should look at them, but yeah.
I don't know if you're gonna understand,
But here's what I have to put, just, I'm adding, is that I think I understand where you're coming from. And I understand that you wanna try to project and see what's going forward. I think that that's an impossible task, cause it changes every year and things just go out of whack. I am more concerned for the immediate right now, which is the building aid expense and the fact that they're
Well,
saying
and
that
I
the
also
wealth
have
ratio has
more
changed.
questions.
So wait, what I'd like to know is a little bit more in-depth information, because I think that is what we need to go after at this very moment for this particular budget that we need to get approved and kind of, you know, out to our community. So for the here and now, right now, the expense aid, if I understood you correct, the expense aid went down because the formula that they're using has the wealth ratio of Port Washington going down? Is
No,
that
I
correct?
believe
It's going up, it's going up.
Going up, sorry, right.
Yes.
So that's where, and they're using that information based on, like, I think we need to do a little bit more.
Well, this is
At
what
least for
Brian
me.
is doing his
That's what-
report
yeah,
on.
the
correct?
executive director
Am
of
I-
New York
am
State
I-
has
am
Bill's
I-
looking into that.
Right, but he's.
So he used to work for the Department of Budget.
Right,
Much more qualified than I am to figure out why our wealth ratio is going up.
Okay. But I think that's where our immediate, if you guys agree, like, I think that's like an immediate issue right now that we need to try to figure out, because that is, we're gonna argue, in my mind, we'll argue the 2% as far as foundation aid is concerned, that we are not getting 2% because she's using her 2% based on the, you know,
The
the wrong
incorrect
number.
the incorrect,
Calculation.
yeah,
Right.
formula, right.
Although, isn't that what everybody else is?
I was just gonna say,
What
is that an
number she's
accurate statement
using?
for
Yes, but-
all districts?
But let's keep in mind, I mean, it is,
Yeah.
but the pro,
Except
the
some
the
got
issue-
more.
No, in our, so we are meeting with our local reps. So on Friday, the local rep also is for Manhasset, Great Neck, Roslyn, who all got the 2% guarantee.
Right.
So wouldn't that necessarily, just speaking for those similar towns of our local legislators, like affect those towns as well as ours?
Yes.
Potentially, that 2% is also a negative 2%, not really
No,
a 2%.
because they got their hold harmless.
You are correct in yes for the foundation aid.
I'm just
Here-
talking foundation aid when we talk
you
on
are,
Friday.
when you are correct on foundation aid. Here's where the issue is in our surrounding school districts. For some reason, it does not appear their expense aids decreased and they increased.
Correct.
And in addition to that, most of our surrounding districts have hold harmless money that they are very happy no one touched. So
Their
they have.
expenses have decreased. Every person I've spoken to, their
Oh.
expenses-based aids have decreased.
Well, I'm looking at
Because
like
we don't see their
Manhasset.
runs, we don't see their run as of today.
That's right.
We don't see their middle column like she did for us.
Their middle column is this. This is their
column is the state
middle column
runs.
is this. And all you have
see
to
it.
do is this number.
We don't see their
their
vote.
first.
We don't see their voter approved, we don't see their vote,
But we
excuse
can,
me.
we can figure out their voter approved
you can see
because you
from
can
it-
just put in the
You
CPI
can see if the
difference.
expense aid went down, ours doesn't have the, so building and, where is that?
So I'm just, it's,
Yeah, so you see all the highlighted
I'm just going even
ones
by
that I have.
transportation. Let's just go by transportation.
So I don't know if we should spend
A lot of
so
time
much
on
time
that,
on
yes,
this, because hopefully, so the revenue budget is one side of the budget. We are gonna look at this and hopefully things will change. This is her proposal. That's why we set meetings with our legislatures and our
Right.
organizations go. And it's important for school districts to look at their runs so that we can understand, and so the state can understand how this affects boots on the ground. Like, what is this doing to school districts? Like, they think they've done something spectacular, but it's really impacting us differently
Right.
in this region.
I know Sandra has more questions. I just have, just
One more.
before we close this out, then, yeah, go ahead.
Before-
You go
no, no,
first.
no, you go-
first.
go-
Go ahead, go ahead.
Okay, you said you were talking about the building numbers and everything. When you say that it's not accurate at this moment, and we think it will get like updated, are they reviewing,
It is accurate for the information that they have right now.
okay,
So they take a data run, it's a snapshot, and it's frozen. So it's not to say it's incorrect.
okay,
The information that's in there is correct for that time.
okay.
So it was probably November 15th.
Is that the
database.
the S form, the
The
web,
ST3.
is that that
Some of
format?
it is, but some of it is real-time information that
Okay,
there's capital projects. So whenever we receive from the architecture that something is substantially complete, or we put in the financial,
cost
cost report, Jessica goes in, and it's a very tedious process. She puts everything in, and then the database will change. So what Jessica is saying, there's reports that she's putting in that will affect this, that will increase the building aid. Because last year, when we had our budget, our state run, our building aid was much less. It was like 250 less, what was on the governor's proposal. And Jessica said, I think I'm putting in all these reports, and according to my calculations, it's gonna be at least 250 more. So,
And that was last year, you did something similar.
correct,
which
so
ended up
I put
being
in the number
similar.
that Jessica said we were gonna be receiving.
And so we'll do that for this year as well. We're gonna use Jessica's, so this actual that we see here, Jessica, you previously said it should be about 1.2, right?
Right.
As opposed to 900,000.
So that's what every district, that's why
Does.
it's part of the budgeting process, is we look at the runs and we say, you know what? This doesn't seem right, like BOCES aid, why is it going down? Some years we've had BOCES aid very high, and I know something here doesn't look right, like why, we didn't increase our expenditures that much. Why is it increasing, you know, but if we know, like this year, we're using iReady through BOCES, we've changed the codes we're taking it out of, so maybe next year we'll be getting more aid because instead of spending it in a contractual code, we spent it through BOCES. So we
These all
look at
move
it.
around, those are movable.
Right, so this is really the budget right now.
My last question, I promise. It's 400,000 difference, right, roughly,
What?
between
is
first column and second column, so
building
between,
aid.
no, total, overall, 20.
Yes, mhm.
So it's overall 400, I'm gonna use the word short,
Yes.
from the voter approved to what we see with the runs right now. What happens
From last year.
from last year? So we're short 400,
600,000.
It's 600
No,
for,
no, no, it's
No.
actually 400.
400,000.
It's not on here.
The voter approved,
400 and 600, it's more.
voter
there.
approved budget is 20,268,000.
268.
The state run as of today is 19,832,000. It's around 400,000.
Yeah, but that's not
No,
the executive
the
proposal.
I'm
executive,
not talking about next year.
okay.
Oh, you want this
Okay.
year,
We're
we're
talking about
short
this
this
year.
year,
Okay.
okay,
Before
sorry.
we move on to the beautiful rollover budget for future, I'm asking about our eminent, right now, the short 400. What does that mean to a district when our run is different?
Sure. So we have a revenue budget, and there's several codes in there that we estimate for. So we have like interest, it's made at like 1.5 million. Hopefully some of that interest will come in higher. We might have facility use that comes in higher. Yeah, so it's really, we have to watch it. We're not going to completely expend all of our budget. So in February, our treasurer actually starts to do a fund balance projection. So she closely monitors our revenue that's coming in and our expenditures. We're going to be shutting the budget down probably end of February this year. So that's gonna stop spending, except for, of course, necessary things. So we do have to watch our budget.
Has that happened before this whole stop budget at end of February?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Every year, it's
You're done. But that was a good
It's a
question.
very
Can be done.
Speak, Julie?
It just-
Two superintendents ago, he used to do it every year, stop spending it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and last year we stopped, like ever since
I
I've
killed my
been.
kid.
I was gonna say, since we've been here, yeah. And just to be clear, even though there was this difference between the voter-approved budget and the state-run number in this second column of 19.8, we were aware of this once May came. This is not news to us as of today. We all knew this, we all were disappointed. It was just unfortunately.
We weren't gonna cut more.
I was here
knew
May
it
27th.
You
You knew it
paying
because you were paying
attention.
attention, you came to the public
You came to
meetings.
every single meeting, you knew it, relax.
So this is not a surprise, I just wanna make sure this was not a surprise, unfortunately. It was a sadness,
Yeah,
but it
don't wanna
sadly
cause
wasn't a surprise.
hysteria. There's no surprise
Yes,
today.
There's no surprise, yes. Okay, so
Okay.
my question is really forward focused for the meeting with Norbert.
I figured you were gonna.
So now I'm gonna go there for just a second. So we talked about expense aids decreasing. However, in our conversation, and focusing on the wealth ratio changing. And that was really focused about building aid, does that also pertain to transportation and the other expense-based aids,
and BOCES.
expense-based? And BOCES, okay.
So all of our expense-based aids have increased. They have not decreased. BOCES has not. Like what we're spending.
What we're spending
It has
has-
not decreased. and
All our
neither has
expense
transportation.
aid expenses.
Increasing,
Okay.
right.
Correct.
You
They're
said aid.
increased. Oh,
It's
I
expense
meant
aid.
the data put in
The
there.
expenditure on our expense aids has increased.
Increased. It has
Including
not decreased.
transportation?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I
Because
just,
even though we're bringing things in-house, that's still a cost for transportation. We still put those into the ST3 with the salary codes, everything.
So
associated
regardless
with it.
of, even if we have a
It's still an aid.
savings, we're seeing that that's going to go into that as
It's
reported
still a
data.
cost,
It's still a
right.
cost, yeah.
But do we even wanna talk about transportation? Because if we look at this data that you're showing us, we're saying that the run as of today is 200,000 more than the voter approved. And then the final executive is less from the two technically. Well, technically, we're getting cut by if we're going by the governor's run today,
We're
then we're
losing
getting
money.
500 around.
Right.
2%
Yes.
decrease.
Yes.
So if you look at the column next to it, you see all the decrease.
Oh, yeah. So there's the percentage.
Yes.
I don't even have to do the math.
You don't, yes, it's already done for you, see?
So why the difference on the transportation? So
That's the question.
That's the same
That's
question.
my question.
so do we still feel?
why is the
so-
other ones?
So can I
Okay.
ask a question? Are we confident then, the way we are confident that building aid will go to be the correct number? Do you think the rest of it will be the correct number also? Like, if transportation is, all of these aids are based on data that we provide.
Right.
So will they
But if
change
they-
it?
If they've changed what our wealth ratio is and there other information that's changing that's not in our control,
Okay,
then that's where the
so
problem is.
what I
So is there,
need,
are there other things that are changed within the expense aid formula that have an effect on us that we are unaware of?
I need.
That's what I'm trying to find out.
You're trying to find that out
And that's what
still.
Brian Tisnick is
Right.
trying to
Okay,
find
so
out.
Okay,
right now, all he's
So we need that
identified is
information,
the
but I
wealth
also
ratio.
feel I need, when I speak to Norbert or the Norbers of the world, or anybody basically, is to know the whole wealth ratios information.
We may not have that though, this is what Brian's working on.
I understand, but how do
What
we?
you could say to him is, last year, this was our transportation costs. This
Mm-hmm.
year, it's this. Next year, it's gonna be this. How could our transportation aid go down if our expenditures are increasing?
I guess, so then what
As
would be
per
helpful for
details.
us
Us
is, could
to
you
have
give us
those
these
numbers.
expenditures? Could you
Right.
give us the
Yeah, can we
could you
have
have the building aid, can you have us the
So the
expense
same
aid
column,
expenditures?
so here, the
For
same
the
column,
last couple years?
I don't even need the last couple of years, in the last
Same
year,
exact
just the way,
columns.
the way
Yes,
this column is
yes.
set up, where it's budgeted, I'd like to have the actual spend.
Sure.
Right, next to it, if you understand what I'm saying, by Friday, and I'm sorry, it's Friday,
Yeah,
too, we're
that's
meeting with
not
him.
hard.
I know you have it, it's a number, so that we could say, I don't know where you're coming up with this information,
Yeah,
that's
just
what
say,
will
"Please
help us.
Yes.
understand
Yes,
what this
yes.
is
Okay,
happening."
cause we don't have data.
So the last budget meeting, we went through the proposed Rockefeller recommendations, right? And we picked like a few of them. You know, we didn't finalize like what we were gonna meet. So let's just say that's out, right? We're not looking at that paper anymore. We're just gonna go based
The
on,
numbers.
yeah,
I
so
think we
what is
go
our
on and-
talking points aside from this, right? Is it, so based on something, I mean, we were there Thursday, the argument is the higher than the 2%, the guarantee, right? We can do one argument of there's discrepancy on both ratio, the inflation, you know, like.
So here's the deal, I think you first frame it on Port Washington, right? So we can add as our introduction a little bit of some of those nuggets that we talked about at from the Rockefeller
That's what we
formula
need
analysis.
to.
We don't need to, but again,
Yeah.
sometimes, and remember, he's new. He doesn't necessarily know our,
But he's already met with Chris
he's met
Shields.
Dr. Shields, yes.
Correct, and he has
And
met,
Ca-
and with
Kathy has met
Kathy,
with him,
so I
so
don't
he
know
has
that
an
he's
idea.
that
We don't
new.
have to go, but we still don't have to go into great detail, but I think you're right. The fact of the matter is that we should point out this and ask this question, but we should also follow it up with looking forward to the future. You know, we are in alignment with some of the asks that are coming from
yeah.
our Nassau Suffolk brethren, right? So we would appreciate the 5%. We still want them to look at their poverty levels and how they're calculating them, and is this the most accurate way to do that, et cetera. Advocating for, you know,
I
greater
still am
consistency
also
moving
going
forward.
to continue to say that Port Washington
Well, that whole,
hold harmless.
the same
it
harmless, I
needs
think-
to be a bigger deal for us in Port Washington.
well, I
I
think that,
think you also wanna focus on perhaps bullet aid. Because I don't know that he can change the formulas or welfare share that's used.
But we always
But
focus on
our
Right.
demographics are changing, which isn't really reflected in
Right.
these aid runs because they're so old. So maybe in the.
but what did they call it? It
short
wasn't
term-
bullet aid. What did Gina tell us?
Well, she gave us a capital
Capital
grant.
grants, right? Because they're
Yeah,
getting away
well,
from
there's
bullet
different,
aid, so,
well, yeah,
right?
okay,
But
but-
you're right, you're exactly right, sorry.
okay. Can we move on from this, because if we're going to have a long conversation, and this is an ongoing conversation.
So
I-
the only thing that we need before Friday
Is
to
the
have us
actual
prepared
expenses.
is the expenditures added to
So
this
basically,
document.
this document with a column that says expenditures.
And do you agree with that? You're good? You got all, you need anything else for Friday's meeting?
I need a lot of stuff for Friday, but I'm good with this.
Okay.
Okay, so the next.
Is it okay? Is it for
thing
Friday?
we're gonna
Okay.
look at is a tax cap
Great.
levy estimate. So this first sheet, is kind of a simplified version, but it's could be a confusing formula. I tried to make it as easy to understand, but I also did include this. This is from Questar 3 BOCES, and it really explains what these numbers are. You'll see that I've left off a few things because they didn't apply to our district. So this really takes you through the prior school tax levy. You times it by our tax-based growth factor. So this is something that the Office of Real Property Tax, they provide to the school districts. Last year, this number was almost 0.
Yeah.
So this number is really encouraging. And this is the actual brick and mortar, what things are being added to new construction, things like that. So we're able to increase last year's tax levy by this percentage. Then we add the pilots in, and then we have the tax levy for prior year capital costs. So what that is it's all of our debt service, less our building aid. So that's how that number is calculated. Then you have the allowable levy growth factor, which is, everyone always hears of the 2% tax cap. It's 2% or CPI, whatever is less.
Yes.
So that's why we have the 2%. So we're able to increase that number by 2%. Then we back out the pilots again, which we're estimating to be the same 6.4 million. And then we have our tax levy limit of 155. But to that, you add the tax levy for capital projects for the coming year, which is, again, any kind of capital expenditures you think are gonna take place in the current year, plus your debt service, less your building aid. And then that gives you your maximum allowable tax levy limit of 166,601,000. So, looking at this, it shows us that we have an allowable increase of $5 million. It's really the amount that we're able to increase, $5,055,000. So what Jessica and I have done, we've looked at a rollover budget, and we're going to take you through that as it currently stands. Now, the rollover budget will change because we're still meeting with our building administrators and our budget builders. So there are some things that may change, it may decrease a little, it may increase. But I just wanted to show you the tax levy limit so that we kind of have a frame of reference when we're looking at the rollover budget.
Excellent.
Are there any questions on the tax?
Sandra has none.
Yes, I have a question.
For God's sake.
Did you see how this was really easily readable? This is where I was just like trying to get for like the foundation.
It's different though, because
I know it's very different.
We would
Or
all like
even
that.
even the census information, like just some of those key factors that go in that we're attempting to argue. I just wanna see, are we actually arguing for the right stuff? That's a different,
In that form.
Yeah, you
I believe in you and
No, she
like-
can't.
Sorry, it would take me like a month.
There are three
Trying to
people,
figure
there are
that
three people in the state of New York that understand the foundation they formula, and even the Rockefeller Institute says that.
One of them is the gentleman, Brian, he actually worked on that. He used to work for the Department of Budget.
Right.
So he's trying to analyze it for me, so when I ask him what happened,
He'll get
and
it.
he says, I'm not really sure, let me look at it,
it's a problem.
I trust him.
Yeah,
Yes, yes,
That-
yes,
I
yes.
trust that
Yeah.
I'm not gonna figure it out.
Okay, we're moving on to rollover budget.
Okay. So now we have our presentation with the rollover budget.
Okay.
Okay, just a reminder, we're always looking at our portrait of a graduate, and we want to guide our decisions by our strategic plan. So we always look to strategically cut back with minimal impact to students. We also try to look at ways of saving money by bringing things in. So that's a common thing that over the last 3 or 4 years we've been working with, and Mr. Graham as well. So we need to make sure that we're continually looking at upgrading our facilities and renovating them so that we're, really health and safety issues and security issues. So the things we're gonna discuss in here is our rollover budget, our key factors, the estimated revenues, which we've kind of done, and then next steps. So as a reminder, the rollover budget is just a preliminary estimate of expenditures for next year's budget. It assumes all current staffing is going to still be in place and the programs will carry forward into the new year. So to do this, we look at trending and historical data and we try to determine the expenditures and the estimates. And the salary costs, that's really giving everyone their increment and the step, which contractually
Right, we
we're
have to do.
obligated to do. So on this next page, we're giving the estimated rollover budget compared to the current 24-25 budget. And it shows you the increase in that. And then for the, it's 5 million about what we're increasing, we show you the share of the increase. So you can actually see the largest contributor to that increase. And Jessica's gonna take us through this chart.
Sure, so the first one that you see is the salaries, and like Ms. Manuel said, it's based on the contracts and everyone just stepping up and keeping the same staff, so that had an increase of just over 3.6%, and it makes up 57% of the overall increase because it is such a large number. Equipment went down just slightly, supplies and textbooks, that is basically flat, it's only like 2.835. Now, the contracted went up almost 4%, and the major contributing factor to that is our liability insurance. We are estimating that the liability insurance that we pay will go up about 15% over this year's actuals. So that is a huge contributing factor. And transportation also is going up for contracted. And that's because our Pierce buses that do the in-house runs, we're going out to bid this year. We're going out very shortly to bid, and we don't know exactly how our prices are gonna come back. We might need more runs, I'm not exactly sure.
Also, our, the parochial runs and the parentally placed runs, those are increasing as well.
So all of our runs are
Yeah,
basically
and
are
we have
increasing.
homeless runs as well, so we are doing a lot more in-house, but we still do have increases.
So only the in-house runs are going out to bid this year? What about the
No,
rest of it? Everything is?
Well, it's really the main runs, but we are trying to do the other runs as well.
You did meet with another, wasn't there
Yes,
another
we
vendor?
did.
Uh-huh,
Yeah.
and so they're going to participate in
Yes,
the.
they have said that they will.
Great.
So we're hoping that the service, it may be an increase in the pricing, in the pricing, I'm not really sure, but,
But in this case, in the rollover, you're putting in for increases based on that. So the liability insurance you're estimating is going to go up 15%, right?
yes, and the nicer, our insurance company, they've met and they've said that it's probably 15%. The current year, it went up 18%.
Right.
A lot of that is based off of the Children's Victim Act.
Mhm.
They've had a lot of claims in other districts, not just our district has it.
So what else is in contracted, just to be clear, it's transportation, insurance?
Yeah, I mean, other
increases
things
are
in
there, other
contracted
things.
is like your utilities that just goes up,
Right. And as we continue to add more
air conditioning.
renovations and air conditioning and stuff, our utilities
Utilities
are
will
going.
increase.
Okay,
Now, BOCES, major part of the BOCES increase is just shifting from other codes. Some things were being done in contractual that are going to be paid in BOCES, or were budgeted in contractual, like the Northwell Health. Last year when we did the budget, I didn't know that it was a BOCES service, so that's 100,000 that's going into BOCES. We also have a little increase in transportation there.
So, I'm sorry to
yeah.
interrupt, but so with BOCES, they also provide transportation for us, so they increased theirs, I think it was 60% their transportation, because they went up.
Debt service is really minimal. Benefits, you know, is our health insurance, our ERS, social security. ERS went up almost 10%. Social security, medical insurance, everything else is around 2 or less, so.
And I just wanna highlight there, typically, when at budget time, we're saying, oh, the health insurance is so expensive, it's through the roof. Well, for the 25 year, it's actually relatively flat, the health insurance, which is a real big saving
big
grace for
savings,
us this
yeah,
year.
yeah.
Because last year that was our big one.
However, we don't know what 26 is going to bring.
look like.
So we've budgeted a 10% increase for 26 because sometimes they will ricochet back. But we're hopeful that all of the 2020 claims from like COVID have kind of settled down and things will start to flatten out. But it's also important, the health insurance goes from January of 25 to December of 25. So we actually split, we have to budget for half of the year at the 25 rate and half of the year at
For
the
the 26, right?
So the 26 is the unknown factor. So
But we're
that's-
putting in 10% for that,
Yes.
correct, okay.
That's basically it. So you're looking at about a 3% increase budget to budget without a rollover.
Okay, so, the key factors we really just discussed, and if you wanna look at the revenue required for it, this rollover budget. So if you see at the top line, it says total appropriations, and our change over the prior year is 5.9 million. So with the tax levy limit, the increase.
5.055.
Right, so you're about, just from your expenditures, that's about 980,000 over where we would wanna be. So now if you look below and you see the state aid cut of $1,041,000, that's now putting you at about a $2 million gap. So when you also, I haven't projected any of the revenue, basically, I just assumed it was all flat. Except I know we had the local aid of the $125,000 from Assemblywoman Saletti's office. So that, I don't see us receiving again unless there's something that can be done. And the state aid I've decreased. So just considering those, we have about 2 million.
Provided if state aid numbers stay the way they are projected on it or ran in January. Not projected, but ran in January. Otherwise, we have a gap of about 900,000. Right, but, yeah.
980.
But we
Nine.
we still have to work on our budget development work. We're
Right, and
going to
that's
be
just a
looking-
straight rollover,
Yes,
which
Yes.
means taking what's in play in this current year and just putting it towards. I usually am the grim person in like this part of the process, but I will tell you that it's not that bad.
I'll be there.
so I wanna also say, put the disclaimer out there.
With the disclaimer.
This is our first
Disclaimer.
conversation that everything we discuss changes from
Right.
day to day to day.
Right.
So what
but
they,
we-
Because we're still
typically don't have it.
fine tuning our budget and we're
Correct.
still
Correct.
looking at things and saying, okay, did we count this twice? Did we,
Mhm.
you know,
Right.
we moved it to BOCES, but is it still in that contractual code? It is
Correct.
a
Right.
process.
correct,
Okay, and so the process though, for all of us to remember is that, as Kathy pointed out, there's conversations taking place right now with every building, right, and every department, and basically asking, what are the real numbers, what are the asks, what are the takeaways, right? There's going to, right, we're still in the balancing, so this is still very early in the
And looking
process.
at current programming and.
And
so
reevaluating.
If there's software that's being used, but only one teacher is using it in a building, can we introduce them to other software? Can we have savings if all the elementary schools are using a software? Can we have economies?
So are we going to do our budget meetings and presentations starting in February, we start, right?
Yes.
Are we going to start them as by building like we've done in the past? Like how, are you gonna stay with the same program and the same
I
system
believe-
we've done?
I believe what I was hearing from the board is that we wanna look at the bigger picture of what, really what initiatives are taking place, correct? And just to look at our budget, how it is, where it stands, and what could we be doing
Well, I think we should definitely just start off with a rollover, right? Because I think that this
That's
is
the first
important
one,
to
yes.
actually reiterate what the rollover is, and then I think you can do initiatives that, the bigger picture initiatives, I guess that's
I
the
think-
direction you've given. I'm not,
Well, I mean, I
don't
think
know
that-
where that's coming from.
Well, the direction we talked about, at least in agenda, we've talked about looking at it, not going through each line item and talking about, I know Mr. Smith's favorite example are the plastic babies, but kind of those bigger picture initiatives
Per
that we.
building,
Per building, yes.
Okay.
But we're talking also about the initiative, more akin probably to how we did it last year. Remember last year, we started off with that rollover budget, looking at everything that we saw, and then introducing into it where we saw we were having bigger initiatives. If we were purchasing a bus, if we were adding staff, if we were taking staff away, looking at it from that bigger picture. That's my understanding of kind of the direction.
well, that's what I was asking, are we doing it like last year?
Pretty much, yeah. As opposed to years prior where we would sit there and look at every
babies.
code and look at all of those things, yes.
Oh,
But
babies.
you like them.
Yeah, I like the babies. I like
Oh,
to
sorry,
do
I'm not in
it.
charge.
Yes, I saw your hand.
Said I was alone on this one.
am not in charge, so yes, I just take it away.
I have a few questions, just to remind myself. So what was the tax increase last year? What did the voters approve in 2025, May of 2024?
4.55.
Yeah.
4.55, right?
That's what we,
Percent.
that's percent,
Right, for the
yes.
tax
Yeah.
levy.
The
Which
tax,
car- which
that's right.
was required a majority,
Correct.
right? If everything stays like this and the final approved is this rollover, what is the percent that you're looking at? Is this the 4.3, like what are we looking at? If you
So the allowable
don't cut the
limit.
2 million,
If we didn't cut the 2 million, it's 4.38.
okay.
Yes,
But
That's that
what-
number that you have down there.
Right, but the
Right.
allowable is not that.
right.
That's right.
Yeah,
That would be
allowable
yes.
is,
The
That would be a-
allowable is 3.13%. And that's what I recommend going out at, and I think we can get there.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting, I'm just working out all the
I don't like to-
numbers.
Yeah, and that's why I have to put something out there. I don't typically like to discuss things like this because
Right.
I don't wanna create a hysteria that, oh my God, we're over the tax levy limit, because this is common with most budget processes, like it's your first look at things. You still have to look at the information, there's so many things. That's why it's a 4-month process,
Yeah.
because things do change. So I think we're in a much better place than we were last year.
That's just what I said, is that
Yeah.
I think
But
sitting
we
at this
are-
table for a long time, I think we're in a much better place.
But we do have a tighter budget
Yes.
this year because we were so careful last
Yes.
year at what we did. So everything is very important, all of the expenditures that we're looking to do and all of the different suggestions our budget builders have. But we've also charged them with, if you have something, how can we afford this? Like, where can we look to make this happen? So I think we're seeing a different mindset in people too, that it's not just, oh, we need this, we need that. It's critical thinking and looking at.
And then if you did a 2 million cut, that will get us to the 3.13%, right?
All things staying
Okay.
flat.
So the only reason I said grim, so this is like this is a real question. Is a rollover budget based on like where we're looking with foundation aid and everything sustainable? And for how long? So I mean this in the sense that the increase in the cost is continually going up of our staff cost for the benefits and whatnot, like our fixed cost just continue to increase, right? There's no, well, I guess like for utilities, we've done work to get, more efficient with that, but for me, I'm just wondering the dialogue, and I know I know that it's not supposed to be grim because it's 4-month discussion, but at what point, I'm trying to figure out the question, aside from is it sustainable, but,
Interrupt you.
yeah.
Last year at this time, we actually believed we were getting a $2 million increase in aid, state aid. And those weren't like super great numbers, but at least we were getting an increase. This year, we're getting a decrease of $1 million. So if we had just stayed flat, we would have been fine. 980,000 is not significant, but we're decreasing in our aid, so that's something we don't control. And that's part of the frustration is typically you should be getting a 2 or 3% overall increase in aid to keep up with the 2% inflation rate, so that's something we're not getting. So that is concerning, and those are the places we need to look to control the outside influences. Like our district is doing everything we can by negotiating successful contracts, by working with our vendors and all of our contractual expenditures.
Bringing things more
Right, and
in-house.
doing shared services and bringing things in-house. But state aid is not something we control.
Which
So
is,
that's
which
where
is
the
why our
frustration
We
is.
advocacy, which
so
is where
much,
the
right.
advocacy comes in.
But Sandra, I think for me, big picture is where are we heading? Our goal is to get to that tax cap. The community was very generous last year in helping support the budget. Our goal is to get to that number while simultaneously trying to see is there a way to bring up the revenue side from the state, which would give us a little bit more flexibility in how we get to that number. But you're right, there's another 4 months left in this process, but we're determined to get there.
And you're also looking sustainability, like this is the fight that we have had, and this is the big argument even with the Rockefeller Institute.
I need to move us along. I'm sorry. You're right. But this is just the beginning of this conversation, and I think we have a pretty full budget meeting today. So I just want us to keep going. So I think just with your last page on this,
Sure.
just to recap for everybody, this is definitely a conversation, ongoing conversation. We will have our first budget session on February 11th at the Board of Education meeting. That's when we kind of start taking over.
no time limit there, so.
There you can ask all your
questions.
questions. I'm
Miss
not in charge of
Bays,
that
don't
meeting,
worry.
otherwise you'd have time limits there as well. We are also, though, just to reiterate, we are going to continue our advocacy, because that is really one of the main things as part of this, as well as you pointed out very nicely. And we are meeting on Friday. I am waiting, I just want to also remind everyone, I also did reach out to Jack Martin's office, and I'm waiting for a date as well. They're all in session in the beginning of the week in Albany, and so it'll be towards the later end of the week, Thursday, Friday type situation. I will get a date back, I'm guessing shortly, and we'll have that meeting as well.
I'll also be up in Albany on the 11th before the board meeting. I'll come back.
So you'll be
And I'll be
advocating,
speaking.
okay. Okay, let's move on. Did you have a question?
I'll wait, go ahead.
Good.
Okay, so the next we can do pretty quickly, unless there's any questions. Special aid fund grants. So these are grants from the federal government with Title I grants, title grants they're called, and the IDEA grants, which are typically special education associated. So this gives you the person that oversees the grants, the term of the grants. Some of them you'll see run from September to August, so that's a little different than our typical July 1st to June 30th. And it gives you the budget, and it really talks about what it's used for. So if you see the 611 grant, that's 1.2 million, almost 1.3 million. This is really a lot of salary codes are in that. A lot of the other grants are kind of really for training and different things to promote immigrant, like support of our immigrant students.
So I just wanna point out the reason for this whole grant, just to remind the committee as well. This is something that we asked for as a committee. We may have actually even said it at a board meeting, I don't remember when. And the reason for this was because of the pending new government, federal government kind of saying that they were getting rid of the Department of Education and eliminating funding. Has not happened as of yet, right? So, and hasn't been discussed. But we wanted to just kind of get a sense of what we're talking about as far as dollars are concerned and what it would affect, how it would affect Port Washington if in fact these grants went away. So at this point, what I think we need to do with this information is kind of keep it in the back of our heads, that we're talking about potentially $2 million if something were to go away, and that then this would have to become a discussion that the Board of Education takes on how we want to, based on the recommendation of the administration, supplement or take care of or fund this $2 million, okay? So I don't think we need to have a big discussion right now.
If I could just add to that, I had a government relations meeting on Friday, and I brought up that question. I said, are we concerned about the federal aspect? And that was kind of like a taboo to talk about, because if it does happen, about 58% of the state's budget is federally funded. So they would be slashing personnel at the state level, and it would really be a travesty. So like, we're only 2 million, we would have much more issues to deal with, especially just getting things processed there and stuff, so.
Right, which could make it, to your point, a bigger issue, so it might not be 2 million only for Port Washington, right? So here we're talking about foundation aid increases and building, all this other kind of information. So if the state is affected by it, somewhere it's going to happen, so.
But in addition, it's nice for us to know this
Yes,
revenue
yes,
exists, we
yes.
barely talk about it, and seeing how it's allocated throughout, right?
So I
To
just
help
think,
offset some
right, I
costs.
think it's just something we need to just be aware of, and let's keep it at that. Okay,
Now we're-
everybody okay
I
with
don't
that?
have a question.
Oh, thank the Lord. Oh, my gosh. Okay. So I just wanted, so we've talked about our debt service, our rollover budget, our grants by category, and we've talked about our tax cap. I think we've started our conversations at this committee level about the budget process and what's out there and what are our expenses and what we have as our cap. We're gonna keep an eye on it. We are gonna continue to advocate, and we are starting our advocacy with the specific legislators. We will continue having these discussions at our full board meetings. Anybody, did you have a question? Did you have something that you held off on?
I did, but it's fine.
Are you sure? Because we're gonna go right into now Mr. Graham's Department of,
My only question, I guess, then, is that as we talk about our budget builders and the budget process, I know that last year, because of the fact that and maybe this is better for Dr. Shields, I know that because we were so tight and we were really looking and focusing on, our spending and waste, et cetera, that through the budget process, we had our administration come through overlapping. So even elementary with middle school, with high school administrators coming through and saying, these are programs we're offering, and seeing if there's even overlap at those levels where they could piggyback and take from one another. Do we foresee ourselves working in that collaborative way this year? Do we see any benefit from it? From a standpoint, especially when we're looking at trying to make sure we're running as effective and efficient as
I
possible.
mean, I think that's part of our ongoing process as we're developing this budget, absolutely.
Okay.
That's critical, yeah.
okay, turning it over.
Morning. So most of our construction projects are funded through 5 different mechanisms. We're going to go over 4 of them today, just give you updates on where all the projects are at. So we're going to start with our bond projects. This is, sorry. And we have 4 projects that are open or under design. One of them is Daly. Daly will be getting a new water main that will feed the entire building and the fire hydrant on the field. That is in relation to the addition that was put on the building, but because all of the parties in play when doing a water main, including the Port Washington Water District, the Nassau County Department of Health, it's really taken a long time, but we've had a lot of good progress in the past couple weeks, and we're hopeful that this will take place in the early spring. We have gotten that design with the district's architect and the Port Washington Water District's architect in line. They've submitted that or feel that it's good for the Nassau County Department of Health, and that process should take a couple of weeks. We have the contractor lined up, we have the contract in place, so we're hoping to close that one out very soon. The Sousa fire alarm, again, somewhat in relation to the addition of the STEM room. When they did that addition, the new components for the fire alarm were not able to communicate with the existing fire alarm. And it led to some compliance issues. We were able to work with the fire marshal and SED to get it approved and get our certificate of occupancy, but with the recommendation that we should replace it as soon as possible. So we're using the bond to fund that. It's a separate project, but it is in relation to that STEM addition construction. Doors at Weber, this was a project included in the initial bond design, and that's replacing some of the interior classroom doors in the building, and in the Flower Hill section particularly, where they're the oldest, and we're gonna go into each one of these projects very quickly just with some pictures. And then bathrooms at Manor Haven, again, renovations of some single stall bathrooms. Manor Haven has a lot of classroom bathrooms and some of the hallway and gang bathrooms. So this is the water main. Again, everyone should have a handout, maybe you can see it cleaner on there, but that water main comes off of Rockwood Avenue, runs across the field, enters the building in the southwest corner, and it feeds a fire hydrant on the field as well. And this is just an update of where that project is. As I talked about, it's underway now, the final steps with the water district, and we're hoping it will be to the county soon, and anticipated construction this spring. Fire alarm, again, designed by BBS Architects in conjunction with the fire alarm vendors. We're waiting for, it will be going up to the state, and it has approximately 16 weeks of architectural review and 16 weeks of engineering. Some of the projects you'll see only require architectural, some require both. Once we get that, any comments back from the state, we'll make the revisions, and then we'll look to do that. We are hopeful to award that contract this summer. This is that door project at Weber. These are an example of some of the doors. You'll see they're not in line with the newer doors that you've seen at Weber in the science rooms, or as we do other construction projects, Daily additions and the Guggenheim and Manor Haven additions. We'll have the smaller vision panel. And this project does include more than just the door. It includes that entire entranceway, and there's some environmental impact as well. And again, that we're hoping to get up to the state shortly. It should be going up next month. And then we will only need one review on that. And we'd hope to do that in September. That would be, in the evening. That contract typically comes in after school, does a couple of doors each night as they work their way around the building. And these are some of the bathrooms in Manor Haven that were called out in the original bond presentation. And it does include new fixtures, it includes new tiles, the environmental. And that, again, we're hoping to get up to the state in February or March, and then we will be required to get both reviews, both architectural and engineering, and most likely the anticipated construction would be July of 2026 because of the scope of work. Very hard to do in an active school building. Sometimes we can do it, we can take some bathrooms offline and work on second shifts, or some of the smaller bathrooms, maybe we can target some of our school breaks, but most likely we would be pushing it out to a summer break. We don't anticipate, yes ma'am?
We're also doing similar to other schools, like we're keeping kind of the same style, right?
Sure, yeah. District-wide, we've, really been standardizing the colors, the flooring, the tile, really trying to get that branding. But the bond only covers the Manor Haven bathrooms.
Right.
We would be looking to do other bathrooms through
We have
capital.
some through transfer through capital and things of that nature, yeah.
When you list bathrooms, are you saying total removal of existing toilets and sinks and just putting in new, or is it also the piping that goes into them?
Yep, it's a total renovation. It includes the tiles, the fixtures, meaning the sinks and the toilets, the ceilings, the lighting. Originally, the bond called for 17 bathrooms. Again, that was in 2014, and 10 years later, we're trying to redesign that scope. We plan to bid it out as a per unit cost, because that will allow us to then work with the building and identify which are the most need, which are the most used. But we do anticipate, probably gonna be down to about 11 bathrooms at minimum, but that will all depend on how the pricing comes in. So that's the bond update. Any questions on the bond? Right, I'm making up time. We're gonna go on, we're gonna move on to capital work.
I said no before asking Sandra questions.
I didn't even bother to wait for you to ask me, I just asked my question.
So capital work, this was talking about the electrical, but I put just a project update here on all of our open capital projects, and capital was broken up into two categories. Manuel asked that I split that, our regular capital and then our transfer to capital. So again, we have 3 regular capital projects open at this time. One is well underway. The flooring at Schreiber was completed, and that is tied to the tennis court drainage and reconstruction, also at Schreiber. We always have to tie in an interior project to make sure that we get that state aid. We have a roof replacement at Schreiber slated for this summer, and that goes hand in hand with the EPC, which we're going to talk about next, so we can accommodate that solar, and then the fuel tank replacement at the administration building. And these are just some pictures of the 3. You'll see that's the new flooring, and again, that goes with those port colors and standardized, really look great.
Very nice.
This is a beautiful picture I took on the roof.
Nice sunset. Did you use a filter?
The tennis courts, no filters. The tennis courts are well under construction. This was, I think, over the beginning of the Christmas break, but you'll see even more work has taken place with a lot of the concrete and the fencing in. Unfortunately, right now, we've hit some weather delays, but we're hoping that we're going to get an early spring, and we'll be back on schedule. The courts will get temporarily paved and lined, and then following or later in the spring tennis season, if time allows, they will get their full color.
So when you do the temporary, I'm assuming temporary lines so that you can use it as of the day after the temporary lines go
Yep,
down?
Mr. Schwartweiser wants to get out there as soon as possible. The contractor has a deadline, and that will make the court playable, safe, and then be able to use it, but it certainly won't be pretty. And then if they do get a break in the tennis schedule, we'll come back. If not, we'll come back in late spring, because we need a minimum of 70 degrees for a sustained period in order to put that color on. We have some green and some bright blue. It's going to be very pretty, but we have to wait until later in the spring to do that. And the drainage work was completed. That was a big piece of this project. You'll see the parking lot also, that needs to be repaved, but again, we need those minimum temperatures to do that. But the drainage work, it was a tight 2-week window there with all the holidays, but the work went very well. We're very happy with it. This is the areas that are getting roof. Again, Schreiber roofing was broken up into 2 phases, where the blue is for this summer, and we prioritize that areas because those are the areas that are going to accommodate the solar based in the EPC, which we're going to talk about next. And that submission was up to SED. Their review is underway. Once we get their comments back, we'll make any changes they require, and then we'll look to issue out that contract, and we're hopeful to award that in July of 2025, in line with the roofing we've done the last few years. The administration, the submission should be, we're hoping, I think the 31st of this month, so any day now. This is where we get into, again, multiple agencies. Not only do we get our building permit from SED, but we also have to get a permit from the Department of Health because of the oil tanks and the nature of that work. And then we have to get into the lead time on fuel tanks, which right now is 26 weeks. So we have to wait to get all of those permits, wait to get all that designed, then order the tanks. We're hopeful that, again, we could potentially work around the operation and do this in late 2025, in the fall. One of the pieces we're working out now is the code has changed as recently as this year, where we can't have the gas pumps within 5 feet of a door. So right now, they're located right in between 2 doors.
Yes.
So that goes down, do we redesign the whole parking lot? Do we eliminate one of those doors? So that's a little bit of a holdup, and again, that change just came in recent weeks. And then if we can put the newer, if we are gonna move the pumps, can we put the tank somewhere else so that we can get that tank online
Right.
before we remove the old tank and then refill the parking lot without taking the entire parking lot, offline. So all of that is in discussion now with the architects and the engineers.
Does that mean potentially higher costs?
They haven't priced it out yet. We have a general, but we would have to look at that. One of the questions they asked was if they dig out the fill, can they store it on site? So that then when they remove the other one, they can use that same fill, but I don't have
Which
a
would
definite
potentially help
offset.
with the
Yeah,
offset.
I think it might cost more, but it might also save them more, so it might work out, but we're all working on that now. And all, again, we haven't picked the location on where that parking lot gets redesigned based on this new law, so that could also change. All right, capital reserve. So again, we talked about the capital reserve as a separate funding mechanism, and it's funding electrical infrastructure. It's a district-wide project, but we have it broken up into 2 phases. And the first phase is at the state. It's submitted, and that's for Guggenheim, Manor Haven, and Sousa. That design was completed. That submission is completed. You'll see with this project, with the oil tanks and with the EPC we're going to talk about, sometimes we get it up there and get the design there, and then we go back with revisions because we're trying to chop away at that 16 weeks. And that's what happened here as well. A lot of this engineering is going around for the other 3 buildings, not including Schreiber, because Schreiber's electric was upgraded in the bond. We wanted to get up there and get on the queue while some of this last minute engineering is still worked out. Again, similar to the oil tanks here, you'll see the lead time on the electrical equipment right now is 50 weeks. So assuming that we get our SED approval, we get our building permit, we get through it with limited comments, we're still looking at July of 2026 in a best case scenario because that electrical switchgear has a long lead time.
I have a question on tennis.
Sure.
I'm just throwing it out.
Tennis?
The tennis courts.
Let me bring my picture back up.
No, you don't need it, it's okay, thank you. Cause I had it and then I was like, maybe I'll wait, and then you brought up electric. Are the light, because you have an early March projected date for the temporary lines, does that include having lights?
Yeah, so the lights are on schedule, the infrastructure is in. Typically, lighting is not an issue in the spring, lighting becomes more of an issue in the fall when we have that daylight savings time. But we're hoping that the lights will be operational with the start of the season.
Can I just ask on the capital reserve project for the second or third phases where we're adding the remaining schools, I don't know if we're in 2 or 3 phases, when will you begin doing those submissions and design completion?
The design is in right now, the engineers are coming, there's some surveying going on, so we're hopeful that within the next 2 months, that design will also be submitted. Again,
Okay,
we
so
wanna
then
get
you won't
everything.
have that much difference between anticipated construction?
No,
there,
we
okay.
just wanted to get what we had
Get
up
started.
there. Those 3
100%.
schools were easier or less involved, so we're able to do those designs. They're all pretty much similar. They're taking the transformer, they're putting it underground, so we were able to get those up and get on the line. All right, so we're gonna move into energy performance contract updates, and we do have 2 energy performance. I know Ms. Manuel talked about it in some of her updates. There was an original energy performance contract done with Johnson Controls in 2014. It was updated in 2017, construction started in 2019. And when that project goes through, we get what's called the M&V report, measurement and verification, and that's to prove the cost avoidance. They don't like to use the word savings because, again, as we've added additions or as we add infrastructure, our bills may still go up,
Right.
but we're still avoiding what it would have been had we not done these improvement measures. So I have an update on that, and then an update on where we're at with our 2024 project. So with our 2024 project, again, the design is pretty much completed. Again, we're expecting the submission this week. It will go up to NYSED, and it does require both the architect and engineering approval. The contract award, we're looking at a revision, and I'm going to get into that on the next slide. The RFP for financing, we're targeting in July. With anticipated construction in 2025 and 2027. So again, with rebates and federal rebates, as soon as we get the approval, we want to get some of the project started. Doesn't matter how minimal, because then we can say construction started, and we're applicable for all those rebates at that time, as opposed to waiting until more of the facility improvements are available.
Federal rebates are still in play?
Yes, yeah, and some of them actually increased. So the facility improvement measures, this is how you measure an EPC, but for this project, they include solar, they include weatherization, condensate pumps, which again, we anticipate we might be able to do in the next couple of months. Insulation upgrades, lighting upgrades, and some ceiling replacements. So after signing the EPC agreement, and again, we wanted to get it up there, and we wanted to start chopping away at those 32 weeks, we were informed that some of the roof sections at the high school, through some engineering and some structural analysis, cannot accommodate solar, so we had to make a revision there. And then also, based on the redesign, the high school, again, was reduced solar. And this gives you some of the breakdowns on the positive cash flow of 8.7 million to 8.4 million. But at the same time, a federal incentive was changed, and this is two parts, is A, the incentive, it was incentivized, I was gonna say, but I'm not sure that's the right way to word that. But also, there's a lot of talk that this might become mandatory, so we're really incentivized to get this while it's an offer and not a mandate. And this results to using US-made products, so we know that solar products manufactured in the United States have a higher unit cost, but they come back with this increased incentive, and that would really offset that. So it says using the required amount of US products would increase the project up to 8.8. However, the positive cash flow after 8 years would just over $2 million. I have a typo in there, but I'll correct that. And then they also made a recommendation that we change the interest rate. The interest rate, when this project was first talked about 2 years ago in the RFP process, they were told to use 4.25, but they're recommending that we go out with a 4.75% based on today's market. And basically, those two scenarios offset, so the project, but we would have to update the contract language. All right, so then moving on to the 2014 energy performance contract, the district-wide, so as part of that, you get a measurement and verification report for all 18 years of the project, but for the first 5 years, they give you a pretty report and some infographics. So I included that. I don't think the pictures in the handouts, but I have it up here. But really, it's positive news, and I know how much the district cares about the environment and how much we talk about it, so it's nice when we can report some good stuff. And this was from August 1 of 2023 through July 1 of 2024. That performance year included $392,000 in utility avoidance and $8,820 in what they classify as O&M avoidance. That's operations and maintenance jobs we would have had to do, breakdowns we would have experienced. And some of those FIMs are calculable, right? You can calculate LED versus a fluorescent light. You can calculate solar versus not having the solar. Some of them are data-driven, whether it's window film and whatnot, how many BTUs, how much avoidance we're having. So that actually, the year was, a guarantee was 348, and you can see we outperformed it with that 392, so we had excess cost avoidance of 52,000 over what the project had promised.
So I just want to, just stop for a second, I just want to make sure that we understand that this is an avoidance calculation, right? Not necessarily an expense calculation.
Sure.
Because I think for anyone who may be looking at our year to year or looking at our actual expenses, you may see an increase. And the question then I think a board member or even a community member may have is, wait.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that we just kind of clarify that it's an avoidance. Now, I guess my question based on that is, how do we know that that's correct? Like, how do I or you or anybody who just knows that, how are they actually calculating that? Is that not a
They
projection?
give you a pretty good report. I brought it with us, and they will show you, they use our bills, our utility bills to prove that. Now, again, you have two sides, right? We've added substantial amount of square footage at all the buildings. So that square footage requires more electricity. We've added air conditioners, that requires more electricity. But they're also able to show that our BTUs or our kilowatts are going down based on the facility measures they did. And again, some of them are easier to prove. Some of them you're taking some understandings in. In this one, again, walk-in freezer, a door replacement, not a lot of savings, but it was a request from the district to add univentilators. That's something that can calculate the motor versus the newer motor versus the older motor. So some of it is really data-driven. Steam traps replaced were done in this, but every 5 years we're typically doing steam traps. So we've already done them again, which is why you'll start to see we're outperforming what they guaranteed.
Okay, I wanted to just put that out on the record type of thing, is that, we understand.
They also give you highlights based on the environmental background. So again, this is that cost avoidance. We exceeded it by 52,000 for the project in total. It's up to 1.9 million. And then the decarbonization impact, and it's written here, but they also give it to you in some infographics. So for this year, it's the same as taking 315 passenger vehicles off the road.
All the trees we see.
I know.
23,430 trees. We chewed
Even with
into
all of
those
Kathy's
trees
copies?
with the handouts today, but, and then the bottom is the project in total. Again, for the 5 years that this project has been in place, we've offset the emissions from 5,670 passenger vehicles, 2.87 million gallons of gasoline, and 0.42 million trees for 10 years. And this newer project that we're engaging will get the same type of measurement and verification. We'll get the cost avoidance, and we'll also get the carbon impact.
Nice.
That's it.
Questions? Sandra?
No.
Thanks
Thank
a
you.
lot. Do you have any questions? Well, thank you for giving us a positive spin to end this meeting. Okay, that wraps up our agenda. That was pretty hefty today. Thank you, everyone. Does anybody have any questions from the committee? I can go to, yes.
For the remaining budget meetings.
Oh my gosh, you were just going right into the next thing. I was going to.
Well, I'll just ask my question
Thank
before
you.
you jump ahead.
That was exactly.
As I'm jumping ahead. So, February 10th, like all these dates, which ones are allotted for what? Can you just get an update, or can I get an updated email, or can you reference an email and I'll find the email of what is
I would
allotted
have
for
been able to
each?
tell you right now, but I couldn't find my folder this morning, so I don't.
I know that we have set agendas for each one already, just to update it. There are some stuff from the governor's,
So what I would ask is that maybe,
Is there something you wanna make sure
Yeah,
we're
what
talking
do you
about
want?
sooner
Yeah.
than
what
later?
is
Why-
it?
yes.
Just put it out there.
How's that for February, we're doing like food service?
Yes, we're doing food
The
service
grant
next.
writing? Is that
Correct, we
next
were
year?
we're just talking
asking for
about
a
what the
grant.
update is.
so those are two of my ones, so
Yes.
I will email, do I say it now or email
Go ahead,
myself?
you could say it now.
Well, just with the governor's proposals, I just wanted to see one with lunch, right? So with the free and reduced for all, now the lunch for all, the proposal,
Right.
right? I just wanted to see how that affects our numbers for future years, cause I remember reading with the, again, I can ask this next month, but just so
No,
it's.
but it's okay to say, to have it prepared for the meeting in case there's something you need.
So
to
So
say.
the COVID years-
assuming that universal free lunch goes through.
Yeah, I remember reading the lunch fund balance and the revenue numbers in the summer when we were discussing the increase in the lunch cost. And I remember seeing in the COVID years, our amounts was very high because of
free.
this, correct. So I just wanted to know how that plays into our
Okay, so
discussion
just keep
for
that
next
in
month,
mind. So keep that in mind, Jessica, as you prepare that for the meeting.
which affects what
If
we do.
know, Yeah.
Yeah, so there
preliminary.
are, you do receive federal reimbursement and state reimbursement. So we need to have the guidance from the state, what's going to be reimbursed, because
Yeah,
if
right.
we're giving free lunch to people who don't qualify for free lunch, who's paying for that? Like, the state is saying they
They're gonna pay
will
for it.
cover our federal reimbursement, but we still have to find out those
Yeah.
numbers.
So it may look different from how we experienced it in COVID, because everyone was still reimbursing us during COVID, so that's why we saw an increase in our lunch fund balance. We
Yes.
did, right, so yeah. We'll have to
That's
see.
next month's
That's next
meeting.
month, yeah.
The other one, I have to work on my questions, but it was about the grants that some of the programs she stated in her,
Who's she?
The
governor.
governor,
Oh, thank you.
the almighty.
The
I'll send an email. I have to work on that one.
Okay, so
I
if
just
you
wanted to know what our schedule was,
Okay,
timeframe was.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
for February
I
10th.
also anticipate that at the next meeting, we'll have an update for this committee, because it'll also be prior to our next board meeting on our meetings with the legislators and where we stand, if we've got any further information. So that's the three things. Ruth, this saves the email of what are we discussing at the next meeting? You've got it.
and so now Sanders adding grants for not just grants for food, grants for all grants, right?
Was February 10th grants for food?
It was just
Only?
lunch, it was just
No,
lunch
and grant writing.
services and grant writing, like
So
finding a
remember,
grant
we had asked
writer.
about writing, looking for a grant.
Right.
I will relook at the whole list
Okay.
if I'm able to receive like the agenda, and then I will double check where my question fits in.
I'm not sure yours is gonna fit in, cause I'm not sure we covered for what you're gonna ask, if I'm hearing it's got a grant situation.
What do we have? It will fit
So
in.
then you got it, so no, I'm just saying, you just,
I'm
we
gonna
didn't,
review it.
okay,
Yeah, I'll
yes,
look.
Okay,
cause then just bring it up, yeah, just say, can we add it,
Oh, I
yeah,
was
can we
making
add
business,
it,
don't
yeah.
worry, yeah.
okay, so next meeting is February 10th. You all heard what we'll be discussing next meeting. And I am now, since if no more further questions, I'm going to go to the community, if there's any community comments. Go right ahead, Sue. Hi.
Hi, so we thought this was the first committee that we should bring up these concerns, but we at Parent Council are deeply troubled by the anxiety and fear that many of our district families are now experiencing due to the presence and actions of ICE in our region. And as a district committed to the safety, education, and well-being of all students, we believe that it's imperative that we address the pressing concerns with transparency, compassion, and urgency. We believe that many families are scared, lost, and confused, unsure of their rights and how to navigate a system where schools should feel like a sanctuary for their children in our district, buildings, and facilities. In light of these concerns, we respectfully request the committee and the board to provide clear public answers to the following questions, whether at this or a board
Sue,
meeting.
am I taking this down or are you gonna email?
I can
you
email this
this?
to you.
Thank you. 'Cause-
Yeah, so the first one is what is our district policy on students' rights while on school property? It's crucial for all families to understand how the district safeguards their students' rights and what protections are in place for all children regardless of their immigration status. And the second question is, can ICE enter our school buildings? Are they able to interrogate students or staff members or remove individuals from school grounds? Clarity on that matter is essential to ensuring that our schools remain safe spaces where students can focus on their education without fear. Number 3 is what steps are we taking to inform and protect our students and families? Our families deserve accessible information about their rights, resources for support, and reassurance that the district is taking proactive measures to stand with them during these challenging times. And it would be great if we understand what other districts are doing and if there's a way that we can collaborate with or learn from our neighboring districts that can help us adopt effective practices and policies to strengthen our approach. As educators, leaders, and community members, we believe that we have a moral obligation to ensure that every student feels safe, supported, and empowered to succeed. And we know that the board and this subcommittee will take these concerns seriously, and we'd like to understand what the plan of action will be to demonstrate our district's commitment to inclusivity and the safety of all of our students and families.
You're like, there's no time limit at these meetings.
Hopefully that would have been under the 3
would have
minutes.
Thank you. Do you wanna comment on that, Dr. Shields? I can just make a brief comment, but I don't know if you want to.
We are discussing, we have stated guidance that we have disseminated to all of our, leadership roles in the district. We've also discussed it as an administrative team. I've had conversations with the school board, and I've also reached out to superintendents in the area to see how they're handling it as well. We're having ongoing conversations with our legal counsel. So it's something that's very much in the forefront of our mind. And, we're gonna be discussing, what steps outward facing we should take as a school district. So it's something that we're working very, very closely on, and a good portion of the weekend was spent discussing it as well, so.
So I think, right, as a board, we have received concerns from parents, and as a board, we are concerned as well. We are taking some steps. We are meeting with our attorneys who are going to be giving us some legal guidance on what the actual laws are. I anticipate that, I think at tomorrow night's board meeting, we might have a statement or not, or have some sort of opportunity.
I think it's too early to say what we are doing until we have the meeting today with the attorneys and as a board. So as a board, we have not come together,
I was gonna
not
say,
at
to
all.
clarify-
So that's the whole issue,
So
is
we've
that
had
we can
emails.
each independently speculate on what is going to happen as a board, but as a board, we have not yet come together to have this discussion. So for that reason, I would say that we can't really go beyond what Dr. Shields has said, what the administration has done, but we will definitely, your questions are all of the questions that we do have before us already to address and
Yeah.
determine what is going to be our public-facing
Which is
responses.
why I thought if you could email that,
I
like
got
press
it.
the email, you have it?
Yeah.
Just only because we do have a meeting soon
You can
with
send
our
it.
attorneys. It'll help to have it.
Do you want me to send it to the board?
Yes, yes,
Sure.
that would be
That'd be
great.
great.
Thank you. Ms. Mulwani.
Thank you. I have a clarification and a question. So first, the clarification is probably easiest. Ms. Manuel, earlier you mentioned that BOCES transportation costs increased. We couldn't really hear whether it was 60 or 16%. So is it 60% or 60? 60.
Yes.
And we are beholden to BOCES to use their transportation services.
Yes. So I did speak to our transportation director and said, we're going out to bid everything else, can you bid that? She said, most of the schools have to go through BOCES, so we are looking, can we just do it ourselves? It's better off, but yeah, BOCES faces the same problems we do. It's difficult to find transportation that's reliable and doesn't just cancel, so.
Yeah.
But also the BOCES increase in our budget-to-budget increase isn't just transportation to
Correct.
BOCES.
Correct.
We've
Right.
also put in more, a lot of the times it's code changes where we're transferring more things into BOCES or taking things out of BOCES, where that's the difference.
But hearing that BOCES,
Yes.
when we talk about our transportation increases, I think the max we've heard in recent years was 10%, 17%. 60%, passing along 60% increase to the customer sounds extravagant from a community.
So they are hiring the same consultant we had to work with our transportation director. They're hiring her to actually hire better drivers, maybe do more efficiencies and stuff. So BOCES is trying to improve their transportation as well.
Transportation is just an issue for everyone.
Yes, it
really
is.
is.
It's
I mean, I'm
really a
hoping-
shame, but.
I'm frightened to see what our RFP increase is gonna show us, unfortunately, so.
The second question is for Mr. Graham. I was wondering if the costs of the construction projects that are currently pending review have not yet actually started, we haven't purchased any materials. Do those account for any projected impacts of macroeconomic factors, such as tariffs, increased labor costs, sort of what the construction world, the scenarios that the construction world is planning around?
Yeah, they have built-in soft costs, which are, inclusive of all of those factors, escalation.
So we're not worried about extreme escalation?
I'm always worried.
We're always
Ah.
worried.
Okay.
Very frightening.
Yeah, we've done our best, and that a lot of those, the bond particularly was redesigned based on, some of those factors, so.
Look, I think we can anticipate some more US-made mandates as we see how it affected our APC. And so there's, but until we can actually get the mandates, there's
It's hard
just
to speculate.
speculation.
You-
Yeah.
Well, it's scenario planning, and that's, you answered my question, thank you.
Anybody else? Yes.
I just have a point of clarification because it wasn't on the sheet. The $2 million current based on current numbers, shortfall that we're seeing has to do with what the anticipated tax levy number is and then the 168 million, correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Look at that, we did it. Not bad. We see everybody again on February 11th. February 10th, sorry.